Hey everyone, this is Clay Doolin from Doolin Guide Service again. I intended on making a video about 2 weeks ago, but things just kind of came up and got in the way. Moving into a new house, so that's pretty exciting. A lot of renovations going on with that, so it's kind of limited some time on the water, but I have been able to get out in the evenings and sometimes in the early mornings while I then work on the house after that. A few times during the midday, and today is one of those days where I got out midday and was able to put together a few things. Fall fishing has started. It's no longer the doldrums and the tough times. We are still seeing kind of a tough time, but it's not that as difficult as was just like say a month and a half ago. Things are changing, and they seem to be changing fairly rapidly. The temperatures on the lake are dipping. Only as of the last few days have they really started to dip. We've now gone from, last week, there was some days in the 90s, 10 days ago, but we've dropped down into upper 60s, 70s, and early, like the mid 70s. But that's actually where our water temperature is now, where it was in the upper 70s, it was in the 80s, a month ago. Now we're looking at low 70s if it's super hot out, 90 degrees outside on a, very tough hot day. But on a normal day now, we're looking at the water temps in the back of the creeks and in the main lake sitting at about the same, 68 to 72. 72 more main lake, 68 in the backs of the creeks. We are seeing a nice drop, especially in the mornings. It's been some cooler overnights, so that's been really good, and it's pushed shad back. Now, instead of this crawdad bluegill-based bait, where the crawdads and bluegills have now kind of broke up, the shad are now coming together, and they're pushing to the backs of the creeks. There's a lot of shad at the very backs of certain creeks. You have to keep going to the back and checking them. Obviously, the early morning and late evening. Late evening has been better than early morning. But the shad have really moved back in abundant numbers in certain places where you can throw a topwater bait and the whole place just kind of explodes with shad. And then there's little pockets of shad, balls of them on the way back into the creeks, about 2/3 of the way back. And if you keep a buzz bait in your hand and a whopper plopper for a good portion of the day, it's going to work out pretty good for you. The topwater bite, that fall, awesome, super kick-ass topwater bite that everybody wants, you're in luck. It's happening. You can do it, and you can do it early morning, late evening are great times to do it. Great times, because those shad get way more active at that point in time, and then the fish are there with them. You can do it all day long if you wanted to, and you were like tournament fisherman, gonna go out, I want my 5 biggest ones. I would probably recommend doing that. That would be an excellent way of doing it. It's just keeping a topwater in your hands, whether it's a walking bait or a buzz bait or a whopper plopper. They're gonna be where you're going to get your biggest bites right now. There's a couple of really big bites to be had on a jig, but the water clarity has changed a little bit. We've seen a precipitous drop in water over the last few weeks. With no rain in the last nearly month, this place is really dry, and it's continued to go even lower. Bull shoals right now looking like, I want to say 12 feet low, 10 to 12 feet low from normal pool. I don't know what normal pool is anymore since the Army Corps has kind of changed that. But from what I know what normal pool is, I think we're about 12 feet low. That being said, the water has changed. The clarity is different. You're not seeing dirty, muddy water, but you're seeing dirty, clean water, if that makes any sense. What I mean by that is that it's not really muddy, but it's just off-colored and stained. If you've ever fished in Oklahoma, It looks a lot like that. I went to Grand Lake probably a week ago. I went to Grand Lake and fished with a good buddy of mine, and it looks a lot like Grand Lake does. It's just kind of that off-colored water, and a lot of fish have pushed up shallow to target the shad that have come. That being said, there are a few other ways you can get them. Table rock, I don't have any info for it on table rock, other than the fact that, it's probably fishing somewhat similar, but probably not as dirty as what you see right now on bull shoals. And I think the water temperature from a couple of my buddies that have fished is a little bit higher on table rock, and the fishing seems to be a little bit more tough, according to what they say. But bull shoals is now starting its fall patterns to where you can really do well if you do a couple of the right things, and that includes buzzbait. Buzzbait. This little guy right here, the water clarity. Usually I throw a green pumpkin one off the back because the water's clearer, but I am now throwing a white one with a gold blade rather than a silver one or a chrome blade with a green pumpkin back trailer. And now you could take this bait and lock it in your hands all day and do exceptionally well. Exceptionally well means 7 to 8 quality bites in a day. Quality bites meaning over 3 pounds. Fish that you can take to a scale in tournament. Another way to get them, when these fish are packed up at the back ends of the creeks, they can be shallow, like places where you wouldn't think that they would live, like 2-3 feet of water at the very, very back of a creek in mud and sticks. That's honestly where a lot of fish are being caught right now for me. That's a Bill Lewis square bill. Something I picked up along the way a few years back. Traveling the country, fishing all the time, is certain areas of the country, certain lures work really, really good. The rock crawler and the wigglewort are what is awesome here in the Ozarks. It's got a cult following. Everybody fishes it, right? Well, in Louisiana, this Bill Lewis square bill is a deal. It's this particular square bill, the Bill Lewis one. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's made by Bill Lewis and it's fairly new. This little square bill has been fantastic all the way at the back of the creeks. 2 foot, 3 foot of dirty water, stumps, individual brush piles that are back there. Because now that the water is super low, the brush piles that were in the center of the creek near the back are visible up on the surface. And you can either flip them with a jig or you can run this past them. Or you can throw that buzzbait, but from my experience, the buzzbait works best up against the bank, shady banks, and the square bill tends to shine in the center of the creek where you've got individual stumps and things like that. Another thing that I'm throwing is black and blue jig. That's a 5/8 ounce. I've been using it. It's abused. 5/8 ounce jig. Reason why the 5/8 ounce and why so heavy instead of a 3/8 or a half is simply and it's a flipping jig with a bigger hook, is simply because I want that thing to fall down to the bottom in the 5 to 10 foot range where most of these now brush piles that used to be deeper are exposed. This jig at 5/8 of an ounce will get down 5 or 10 feet to the bottom, and you can extract those big fish out from that brush pile that now the tops of it are exposed. It's pretty awesome that these brush piles are now exposed because it gives you a isolated single piece of color that you can look at and visually see and throw to and catch one off of it. So that's what I'm using. I would pretty much exclusively go to black and blue right now. That's my opinion. For bull shoals, that is. And the other bait that I'm using right now, just to cover water when I don't see activity on the surface, I feel like there's shad around, my locator will show me that there's some shad around, is this bait. This is a shad pattern. You can pick up any kind of shad pattern bait that runs maybe 9 to 10 feet. You don't need to go any deeper than that. The fish are pretty shallow. 9 to 10 foot diver. This is a Lucky Craft 2.0 XD. It says extra deep. It dives for about 9 to 10 feet. It matches the shad that are around right now. got a little green back to it. If anybody's been paying attention to my videos, the green back is kind of what I look for. This is going to match the hatch on the money all the time. I would throw something that looks like this. You can throw a 5XD, you can throw a 6XD, but I probably wouldn't. It's a little too big and it doesn't match the hatch and it dives a little too deep. But something similar to this should get you bites when you're not seeing the activity on the surface. Taneycomo, haven't spent much time on Taneycomo lately, but Taneycomo, up some of the creek arms, there's still a lot of activity. Early morning topwater's been good. It seems to me that the big fish that I have been catching on Taneycomo haven't been coming. So the numbers have actually been up, but the size have kind of gone down for me. And I haven't quite figured out just yet where the big girls have gone on that body of water. But I will say that the numbers are fairly decent. They're now away from the grass. A lot of the fish are away from the grass. Not too many fish on docks anymore. The bluegills have kind of gotten off that. Occasionally you'll get one on a dock if you want to stay dedicated to it, but the size isn't there anymore. In my opinion, the best way to find the numbers and a little bit of size is to find any bit of current that's got just straight rock on it, just away from a shallow flat of grass. They've now moved off that shallow flat of grass. They've gotten up on a current edge with some rock on it. Shaky heads worked really good. Just a jig has worked good. The big glide bait is back in action. You can throw the big glide bait a little bit, and some of the larger swim baits are now working on those rocky areas where the flat ends, and now it begins rock. I'm about to show you what I'm targeting now on bull shoals. That ends with Taneycomo stuff, but we're going to talk more about bull shoals. If you guys are coming to Branson area, I highly recommend kind of staying off Table Rock right now. To me, the bite hasn't been fantastic. It really hasn't. And there's some people that I've talked to, the tournaments, I look at the weights, not very good. The bull shoals weights have been stable and decent. Even people at the bottom end of the tournament are still catching limits. Sometimes not big limits, but they're there. So I'm going to show you what I am targeting right now as far as the area and what to look for. So here we have a bluff that moves to a transition that goes to super skinny water at the back end of a creek. There are shad all the way back here, and you can see some of them hitting the surface every now and then. But these bluffs will hold what I think are the bigger fish. You can fish the super shallow stuff way back in the dirty water back there and still get multiple bites. But the bigger fish are on those first bluffs at the very back, the last bluff at the very back end. I call it the first bluff because I've been targeting the back end of a creek working out. But to most people, it's the last bluff that transitions into flatted out back end of the creek, dirty, shallow, muddy water. They're just piling the bait up against that. And you can target just those and do super well. The fall bite has kicked off. We've gotten colder temperatures overnight, and the best is yet to come when the rock crawler and the wiggle wart bite pick back up in probably 3 weeks, and you can now put the rock crawler, the wiggle wart, and the spinner bait in your hand and just throw a jig at everything that looks good. We're getting really close to my favorite time of the year, which is November and December. We get a nice little dip in temperature in the next 2 weeks. Things could get really, really interesting, and a lot of big fish can be caught. Anyway, if you have any questions, you want to know more about Table Rock, Taneycomo, bull shoals, what the bite's like, where to go, or heck, you just want to be shown. Coming out with me, Clay Dooland, Dooland Guide Service. Contact me, 417-332-5873. Thanks a lot, guys. Hope to hit you guys back in the next 2 weeks, not 4 anymore, and give you another report. And hopefully the fishing's gotten even better.